Hello, I'm Rob Price. This season, we're exploring Agentic AI from the perspectives of those driving its evolution. Welcome to Futurize.
My name is Husayn Kassai. I'm the CEO and founder at Quench.ai. We help mid-market companies discover, deploy, and benchmark AI that works.
And Hussein, I'm conscious that so firstly, welcome to the podcast. But I'm conscious that this is your, well, at least second venture, but you've done some interesting things before, haven't you? So can you just explain, I guess almost, well, what you did do before, but then I'm interested to kind of know why you've then thought Quench is the thing going forward.
I started my first company while I was still at university called Onfido, which is an identity verification company. My parents moved from Iran to the UK when I turned 10, and it took them a while to be able to verify and prove their legal identity for them to rent in their own name and open a bank account. So during 10 years later at university, I studied the identity verification process and saw that it was quite broken. Either you had to go through a credit bureau model, um, or go and in person, have a bank branch sort of verify that you are who you're claiming to be, which was quite costly, and therefore financial services wasn't accessible to many people. And half the world's adult population are underbanked or unbanked, so don't have access to financial services, and therefore don't even have an identity profile to be verified online. So with Onfido, it was a case of using what at that time was essentially not AI, but narrow AI, computer vision and machine learning, the predecessor to maybe Gen AI that we're all now familiar with. And that was taking a photo of the ID, a photo of your face, so you could sign up to an online account. I built that over 10 years. We were lucky. It was the right time, the right place. It became sort of a category leader in its approach. And that sold about 18 months ago. And so, yes, it was at the end of my journey, we were $100 million in annual revenue and 520 people, and very much just enjoyed the whole process. During that, I saw how powerful AI could be if applied properly, and that how it could help essentially companies do so much more than they previously could. So I knew that my new company would be equally geared towards how AI could be put to its best uses.
And actually, as you've explained that, I can almost see the pattern because I mean, you said it was about making it easier in the example that your parents had got, making it more accessible as a process. And I guess one of the things that I've talked about quite a lot, both on this podcast and previously, is that the ecosystem around AI is mad. I mean, kind of the pace of change is phenomenal. And if I, as a business, wanted to understand where I started or how I dip a toe in or what the right solutions are, that's really hard at any point in time, especially if you're a mid-tier or smaller organization. So the idea of making it more accessible to them, enabling them to find a way of accessing somewhere that's useful, seems a logical pattern. Is
Yeah, and that's exactly where I felt that there's um, not only a great technology that could be used, but it's also like very misunderstood. And that is what we've seen in the last few years through hype and hype in different ways. You have on social media, there are sort of what tended to be crypto influencers now being some AI influencers saying you're going to get a 100% automation of the whole workforce. Come and build away is basically plug and play, and off you go, like a one-person unicorn and an army of agents and all that sort of stuff. When you look under the hood, as I know you have done, Rob, it's you basically see this is often not much there. And in my strong view, we're not going to enter this world where the whole workforce is going to be automated. Or you're going to have AI CEO, AI CFO, and so forth. But equally, on the mainstream media, it's not much better. You have the CEOs of all these hyperscalers and these large technological advanced companies just continuously promising AGIs around the corners. This year, it's next year. We're going to get the smartest human by next year, and it just never comes. And that's in part a hype because if they don't talk about how advanced they think AI is and AGI especially, their share prices go down. So all this is building into a misunderstanding and frankly there's limited discussion on all the limitations of AI and how it's quite different to the way the human mind works and how we define intelligence and so on. So I'm interested in the technology and have been. I've been building in it for 15 years, but crucially on where it ought to play a role and help better medical diagnosis, better education, a more productive workforce, and all those things. At the same time, not get caught up in the hype.
And I think that's what I really enjoyed about, well, when we first met, so the UK AI event that we met at a few months ago, we seem to be talking the same language. The way that you talked on the panel that you were on about agentic AI was the recognition that said it can do some amazing things, but not in the way that kind of a lot of organizations or people are talking about it. So trying to kind of make it real to people. How's that conversation going then in terms of the conversations you're having with mid-tier? Because I guess the advantage of being a mid-tier organization is you can choose to do something. You don't get stuck in the layers of bureaucracy that bigger organizations can often find themselves in. But at the same time, that visibility of what the new art of the possible is kind of is an uncertain space. So how's that starting?
It helps a lot more with mid-market companies, and it helps with every quarter that goes by when, frankly, companies fail. And the MIT report is often cited and essentially talks about how 95% of all these AI projects are failing. But that the S&P Global Market Intelligence also released a report that is that the AI project failure rate is also increasing. So when many are trying and they're repeatedly failing and they're seeing that the promises aren't being delivered, they're starting to realize, okay, there's a problem here. And what is that problem? That is a good opening for there to be the voice, which is now in the minority, but I'm sure over time it will grow, of let's understand the actual dangers, first of all, of AI, and secondly, the limitations. So those conversations, when it's on a workshop setting or sort of whiteboards, it's easier. But in essence, it's like AI should be thought of as very, very good at probabilities, but it has almost no understanding of perspective. And you have, when we're in discussions of like super intelligence, let's just break down what do we mean by intelligence. I use John Vervaeke's model, where it breaks it down into four, but the first three, the key ones, there's propositional intelligence, which is knowing facts, and AI is actually very good. That's pattern recognition. That's why in coding, you're going to get junior coders being less needed because AI can now do that. And at the same time, senior coders are more in demand than ever because their judgment and the perspective is going to be crucial. Paralegals in a similar way because it's contract pattern matching, essentially, which AI does very well. And customer service, 80% of queries that come in typically are the same questions, like what is your refund policy, what is your opening times, whatever it may be. All that goes away, and then the 20% is going to require more intelligence than before of human intelligence around triaging complex situations. So you have propositional intelligence. The second is procedural, which is a know-how and the different steps that are needed, and that's often AI is good at it. And then there's perspectival, the third level of intelligence, knowing what matters. And that is what AI is bad, and in my view, will continue to be bad. I don't believe in AGI in the way it's currently described. So AI, in short, is very good at being able to measure what can be counted, and humans are going to need to continue to be needed for deciding what counts. And AI is where there's a verifiable answer. You ought to over time think that AI should play a role in this. And humans are needed where there's a need for reflection, again, on what counts.
You touch at the start of that answer on a key area, and I think one that we've touched on before in the conversation, which is the need to reevaluate learning pathways. Because, in a sense, today, those senior coders or those senior consultants, or take any of those kind of professional services type professions, they're there. But those starting out, who kind of maybe can the volume can be replaced or certainly augmented by some of the AI solutions that are emerging. There'll be a need to find a different way to expertise, and of course AI could help there potentially. But have you seen anything there in terms of? I mean, it's something we touched on my previous conversation around the consulting industry. How do you become a senior expert consultant if the opportunities and the volume of opportunities are lessening in the market? Any thoughts or answers on that area?
It depends on the type of consulting and the type of expertise. I feel that there's a certain type of expertise that's going to be in significant shortage of demand. Excuse me, in significant shortage of supply, and it's going to be significantly sort of demand will far outweigh supply. And that is, I'll answer your question, but that is part of what really frustrates me about the wrong narrative that you're going to have 100% automated workforce next
Yeah.
quarter, because I don't think that's ever going to happen, first of all. Secondly, if you're devising like education policy, for instance, and everyone tells you that, be it on social media or mainstream media, and who you feel are like these tech leaders, be it NVIDIA, XAI, OpenAI, and so forth, then why would you invest in education for under 18s, right? And that's bad. That's a big problem because we've never done such a bad job of under 18 education. It's getting worse. And so we're going to not just have a shortage of the supply of the skilled individuals that are going to be needed into building like a strong economy, but it's probably going to make it worse. So on the specific type of consulting and expertise that are needed, if you reframe that as forward deployed engineers, they are in the most significant demand need there ever has been. So Accenture, Scale, faculty, and most of these consulting firms, but the most well known is Palantir. They go into large enterprises. They put these consultants and forward deployed engineers into those large organizations. For most of the first year, what those consultants or forward deployed engineers are doing is kind of structuring those organizations to be able to read the sort of information flows between the systems and deploy AI where appropriate. But it's really often only the second year that they're able to actually move the needle on those changes. And that goes back to one of the other important things with mid-market companies, typically 100 to 5,000 employees, is that the tooling and the software systems that they're using are a little bit more straightforward and simple. They're a bit more standardized and fewer like custom workflows and so forth. And so it's more able to be AI compatible. Whereas, again, the studies and research from these much larger enterprises show that roughly only 20% of the workflows that are deployed in one large enterprise can be taken to another enterprise. Whereas for mid-market companies where you and we operate in, it is significantly more common.
So part of it is repeatability, but how are you finding that those mid-tier organizations are thinking about adopting? Because we've talked about some of your approach there, but is that common across those different sectors that they operate in? What are you finding in those conversations?
There's a great variety. We talk about our own framework, and they what tends to happen. I would say I'd break it first into like three types of organizations. There's the 1% that are very, very not just tech savvy, but they have the resources to actually build out internal capabilities. Many of the Fortune 500, and you could say like Klarna and these other companies. Then there's about 4% behind them that are law firms, accounting firms. They have like an IT services team. They are the ones that we essentially typically go for, where they have they're in many ways tech, but they need help. And then there's 95% behind them. They normally need to go for like agencies which do it essentially end to end. Was we are more the tech and service parts. And the framework is we talk about three levels. And the three levels map onto the types of AI intelligence in some ways. The first level is retrieval, so workplace search. You integrate your different software systems. We're able to search across all of them and find whatever it is that you're asking, which AI is particularly strong at. The second is workflows. All the invoices that come into my organization, can you check the email? Can you identify where there's an invoice? Can you take the invoice out? Can you extract all the numbers? Can you put it into a payment process system? Can you have a human confirm and then can you make the payment? So instead of it taking 20 minutes normally of manual work, now it might take 3 minutes and done faster. So those we structure those. And if it's straightforward, we have blueprints and templates. We do, and if not, we have partners that come and essentially do that. And then the third level is domain intelligence, where there's specific subject matter expertise needed. And that's where we recommend partners. So Novel Book for your accounting, or Smart Recruitment Smart, excuse me, for recruitment shortlisting. Argo for your insurance, and so on. So that you go through these three levels, um, from retrieval to workflows to domain intelligence.
It almost touches on, I mean, one of the things that I found in work, some of the work we've been doing, especially early on, where we're connecting to tools in different third-party AI products, is that those products are evolving so quickly, and the performance of those products kind of varies that you almost need that ability to switch products in or out, dependent on any point on time, to deliver a continued service. In which case, the idea of an AI broker, almost a broker layer, is that something that is that a reasonable um, um, comparison in terms of kind of the things that you're doing there? Because in a sense, you're bringing a range of tools for their benefit, but it also means that you need to be on top of the market to know that the kind of best tools are kind of within the portfolio.
Yes, so that is a good summary. So for retrieval, we're LLM agnostic. What is the best LLM to do? What is that query sort of needs? Second is for the workflow builder, we're agent builder agnostic. So any agent builder you can build on, you can just essentially deploy. And as for third parties who you should outsource that whole vertical to, we're building on those partnerships all the time. And being that kind of uh, independence broker where we have our opinion based on our expertise, and our whole thing is around benchmarking, and that what should be the norm for this workflow that you want to do. Are you below, on, or above what your essentially industry benchmark suggests? That's essentially the partner layer approach that we under one interface, being able to manage all of that.
I think all of the conversation touches on, well, the broader need for everybody to kind of upskill and kind of get a better familiarity with the opportunities that the innovation and evolution of the market kind of presents. And I mentioned UK AI earlier, but the other one that just I'd like to highlight is your work around the London AI Hub, because kind of the necessity of ecosystems and collaboration and mutual learning and kind of evolution, I think, is a critical one. So could you talk a bit about that?
Of course, so this is earlier this year, along with other AI founders. So we constitute like London AI founders. Then there is Merantix based out in Berlin, and this Tech Nation is just part of the Founders Forum group. All of us collaborators came together to set up the London AI Hub so that it becomes the central point for all the activities around AI in the UK and especially London, so that it's not just the founders and the operators that are building, but crucially the wider stakeholders, policymakers, regulators. You mentioned UKAI, who've been quite a few times on our great partners, and academics. And it becomes like that neutral space where you have all these discussions. And it's an area that we are modeling it off of Level 39 that started for FinTech a decade ago. Back then, you had Revoluts and FinTechs, RegTechs like my pro forma company, Onfido. But you also had the Financial Conduct Authority, the regulator. They all came together and they were able to learn from each other and make progress together. That at the London AI Hub now with AI, the Department for Business and Trade came and did a workshop. Ofcom, one of the sort of key AI regulators, came 5, 6 weeks ago. They're going to come again. Anthropic do hackathons here, level 30, excuse me, 11 Labs did a hackathon here. And all this really matters because of going back to my original points, there's misunderstanding around AI and there are dangers with it. And frankly, you mentioned around the need for upskilling and education and so forth. That I find it continues to be a very, very big problem. The automation trend that is pushing labor down in a sense of not necessarily being unemployed, but getting terrible jobs in the sense of low, if any, protections, low wages. These are on a trend that is now going to be accelerated by AI. And on the one hand, AI can make the whole workforce more productive, the whole economy more productive, but only if, as a society wide, those who are left behind are receiving the protections they need and opportunities that they need. And the way we're doing it right now is actually the opposite. We're aggravating and we're frustrating, and that will continue to have consequences. So I was particularly enthusiastic of starting the London AI Hub because, along with some of the other foundations and academics, is to raise an awareness of A, the limitations, but B, the dangers, and hopefully have some sort of impact on the appropriate policy remedies needed to ensure like basically everyone gains from the benefits of that AI can bring.
I can only agree in the sense that 10 years ago now, I created corporate digital responsibility to shine a focus on organizations and the way in which they adopted technology and thinking more broadly around the impact on people and society as a whole. That's the work that I mean, that was the subject of my first podcast actually that ran for five seasons. So thinking about not just I mean, I often talk about somebody I used to work with who I'm sure would have only been happy as a CFO if there were no people left and the profitability was therefore maximized. But that's not realistic if every organization follows that approach. So thinking more thoughtfully about that balance, I think, is a critical thing. The work that you do must give you, and indeed the work that you've done, kind of in terms of Onfido, must give you an enormous wealth of expertise around what to look for or how to advise those other startups that kind of are working around the AI hub and in the community. So if any of those were listening, or if anyone was listening to this thinking they were just setting out in their first kind of 6 months, 12 months of doing something themselves, which I always think is a immensely brave thing to do, kind of in terms of stepping out and kind of doing something with your own commitment, your own money behind it, or indeed supporters. What would you pick as to kind of in this agentic world, in this AI world, what would you advise those organizations? Just a couple of top tips based on your experience.
Absolutely. So as for, well, those who are looking to enter the workforce for the first time, the main advice is like it's probably never been this tough in relative terms for decades, if not more than a century. So I feel for them. And part of it is especially those who went through, they got to go to university, but went through it during COVID, they had even less of an experience. So the main thing is, as like advice to maybe under 18s as a whole, try your utmost to do all the things that are special about like humans. That's like libraries and like play centers and like sports and all the social activities that really matter. They're underrated, and but they really it shows as like an employer when you look to hire. It is often thought of like this is the employer's responsibility, but you know, at the age of 20, when they come through because their local libraries and sort of swimming pool and everything else was shut down, then no, I don't think like, it's practically not possible for the employer to be able to do anything with that and all those limitations. That's why those are things that really need to be worked on. And don't buy into the hype of building, like just to the crypto folks, like, hey, you can build your own AI agency and like make it big. That again rarely doesn't work out. Try to join training programs, try to join areas where you get exposure to the way like AI companies are operating. 90% of VC funding now goes to AI initiatives. Um, and in terms of funding, quantum anyway. So this is here to like be continue to evolve. And then to organizations, it's a case of again, go in with a program to try your best to be agnostic as you can. I know I'm partial to this personally, but I think that we will come a point where we can already see the limitations of the different large language models. And there should be a healthy chunk of skepticism across for the hyperscalers. You know, if there's a tariff war and you're switched off, then you ought to be mindful of that. I am pretty certain in the coming years we'll have local and small language models operating per company. So these, whether it's workflows or any AI capabilities you're building, you're using a blueprint. Those blueprints should be conducive to and adaptable to actually change the models as you need them. So, with all that said, I would start it as like baby steps. In my mind, our framework is retrieval. You know, let's just make it easier for your colleagues to search and find things, and that will save them minutes here and there. Second, where appropriate, workflows to then be able to take what might normally take hours of savings and bake that in. And over time, there will be times where specialist areas can be outsourced fully to other companies that might be able to do a better job. That historically wasn't possible because of AI. Now it is possible, and as such, consider those. So I would say baby steps is the best way. We do a free AI use case report for anyone who's interested, where we essentially take a few questions and we tell you all the different use cases that you might be able to run in your organization for those who are interested.
Cool. I have done a couple of events in the last couple of weeks, and I think the question that everyone asked me at various points was, is the bubble about to burst? And we've touched on a number of things throughout the conversation that relate to that. For example, the MIT 95% report and others. It does feel as though there's a bit more resistance in the market in terms of kind of uncertainty, perhaps. So I guess the same question to you really is, what do you see happening over the next 6 to 12 months in terms of this AI excitement in the context of agents, agentic? But what do you think the patterns will be for those organizations who ride through whatever does happen? Because actually, as you say, there are things that are um, less hype related that can deliver value and work. And they're some of the things that we've been talking about on this conversation.
As and when as long as there continues to be ambiguity around where does the value lie, there will be a growing pool of capital, financial capital going into companies that frankly should not be going there, or overvaluing companies where it shouldn't. There is this advantage that the bulk of that funding is coming from already the richest companies the world has ever known. So if there are those who are going to be making losses, it's typically coming from those who already have a lot to lose, which is a little bit different to the 2008 crash. Most of those who bore the brunt of those costs could least afford it. And the where the value lies and clarity over the coming, whether it's 1, 2, or 5 years, on where does the value come from, that once we have consensus on that, I think that's the point at which we'll be out of essentially bubble territory. And that consensus, which is currently like a narrow view, one, in my opinion, is uh, the commodification of large language models and the value and power of open source models, which I'm very enthusiastic about, that are much more efficient and not like killing the planet the way some of these unnecessary, like power hungry frontier models are. And so that will be a good thing, first of all. The second is the value in actually the deployment of AI, and the bottleneck there, in my opinion, equally will be the human expertise needed to actually to move the needle on the significant workflows and others. That's why for us, it's like building out our partnerships with AI agencies
Yeah.
who come and essentially help with the building. And finally, there is a bubble will perhaps be resolved where there is so much concentration of capital going into so few companies, and that is a function of a few things. But a key one is that we don't have enough um, startups built by operators and founders than we could have had. And what I mean by that is in a sort of, you've been to all these founder round tables, breakfasts and others where like the discussion, 99% of the discussion is, oh, we have a financial capital problem. Oh, government, can you please help us, give us some sort of like incentive to invest a bit more? And can you get pension money in here? And all these things. Like some of those are okay things, but that's not going to move the needle. These VCs have not run out of money. What they've run out of is great companies to invest in. And the reason why they've run out of great companies to invest in is because of the under 18s are not educated in the way they should be and not given the opportunities they should be. So that you're able to get more operators and founders building great companies so that you increase the supply of investable startups, and therefore the financial capital will flow into the human capital, which I say 99% of the bottleneck and challenge is the human capital. So again, part of the bubble is because the third dimension is excess financial capital going into concentrated in a small number of startups. But over time, as we're able to see that AGI is not going to happen, we're going to have very many more startups in a wider pool, which will, in my hope is like stop the bubble, or excuse me, it won't stop the bubble, but it will prevent after this bubble not being as bad.
Yeah. And I think it in a sense, I mean, I agree around the models, for example. I think kind of we're doing a lot of work around small language models in the context of multi-agent teams because not every agent needs a hugely powerful model to drive it, and there are environmental impacts of that. Plus, it also insulates you from those potential negative effects. So, completely agree. Um, I think in a sense, no one has a crystal ball. What we can agree is there is something that is valuable and useful for organizations to gain access to. But I generally feel that I've been talking about a bit of an anti-pattern for the past kind of 2 years in that market because a lot of the uh, investment conversations are so model centric. It's thinking about how an organization can deploy something usefully in that context of that organization's secure IP, for example, is a bit of a different concept. So I do think that there is a need for um, a more universal understanding around what the emergent patterns will be, whatever those are. I'm just saying there's different patterns that are there. Um, Hussein, fabulous to talk to you for the past half hour on Future Eyes. I look forward to meeting you at another UK AI or indeed AI Hub event in the not too distant future.
Thank you. Pleasure was all mine.